Hello and welcome to the Time and Change Will Surely Show. I'm Tony Gerdeman here with Juck Milletti as we discuss the past, present, and future of Ohio State football. Every week we take one topic and look back, look at today, look at the future of that topic as it relates to the Buckeyes. This week we are talking the Ohio State linebackers. Plenty of history to look forward to, plenty of present to talk about, and with James Laurinaitis as the position coach, certainly a very good future to discuss as well. So Juck, how you doing?
Fantastic, buddy. My favorite position always has been. I just love linebackers, have an affinity for linebacker play, and it's just it's what I dig. You know, if you look back on my jersey wall, I think linebackers probably represent more than anybody else, and that's for good reason.
Especially a place like Ohio State where the history is rich, just like it is with running backs, just like it's become with receivers. But linebacker, I think for me growing up, that's the number one thing. And for me, I'll just tell you, like Chris Spielman was it for me as a kid. He was my Buckeye. He was Ohio State for me. So when we talk about linebackers, like who is the guy that is that for you? Like the first linebacker that you really remember as a Buckeye?
So the first one that I really fell in absolute love with, for me, was AJ Hawk. But
Mm-hmm.
Spielman, I'm a little younger than you, and I always had that same reverence for him growing up. I'm gonna take that back. The first one I really fell in love with was Katzmoyer, for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely Katzmoyer. But I loved Hawk more as he came around. But Spielman, a little bit before my time in actually seeing all his exploits, but I'm from Northeast Ohio, and his legend
Mm-hmm.
is so big here, particularly when I was a kid and first kind of becoming a Buckeye fan that was actually like paying attention to games. It was so large, and it's just to me, he's always going to be, that dude. I wish I could have seen him more. I wish you could see more highlights from back then. It's tough
Mm-hmm.
to find. You can find some clips of whole games and watch the whole games, but you can see when he was playing for the Lions, I watched him a ton, and, watching the Lions with him and Barry was always just such a joy.
I don't remember a lot of watching him because also don't remember much of his teammates in terms of watching them. But I have memories of him, like what interception against Texas A&M, and he did some somersault on the sideline as he got tackled. The Earl Bruce stuff, like I have specific memories of him growing up, and that's just. And then, as you said, watching him with Detroit and watching him be an All-Pro and everything he stood for, yeah, for me, he's like that guy. So I want to start this one. Let's do a fun common thing. Let's talk about our Mount Rushmores of Ohio State linebackers. And I'll give you my first three, and then I'll let you go because I still think I have to decide on my fourth. And this is in terms of the four linebackers that we're going to put on our Mount Rushmore that we watched, that we saw, because I didn't see Tom Cousineau come up with 244 tackles in 1978, but it sounds awesome. Like I didn't watch Marcus Merrick before Chris Spielman, but for me, the three guys that it always comes down to the three best that I can remember or saw or know. That's Chris Spielman, AJ Hawk, and Ryan Shazier. Now, I was in college the same time as Andy Katzenmoyer, and that freshman year was incredible. I think James Laurinaitis is a three-time All-American, certainly bears some consideration, but those three for me, AJ Hawk, Ryan Shazier, Chris Spielman, I could throw anybody out there and I'm going to feel good about this monument of rock that I've got in my backyard.
Yeah, I feel very good about your monument of rock. My Mount Rushmore is Chris Spielman, AJ Hawk, James Laurinaitis, and Ryan Shazier. Fifth is Andy Katzenmoyer. I thought my Ryan Shazier pick would be a little out there, but you're right there with me. That dude is just a different animal, and I think he kind of, for some reason, I don't know if it's the era, but doesn't get brought up as much as these other guys. The speed that he played with, the intensity, the power that he generated with, a relatively lightweight compared to some of these guys, and leadership, everything about him. We saw him at the Student Appreciation Day scrimmage, and I was just in awe. The first time I'd ever seen him, it's like, oh my God, it's Ryan Shazier. It was crazy, but yeah, man, the guy was in that Wisconsin game. Oh, that Wisconsin hit, like memories. There's a lot of them when it comes to Shazier.
Yeah, wearing a different jersey against Penn State to honor a friend. He gets a pick six and runs it back with that. Tom and I did a recent, we've recorded a Buckeye Weekly where we talked about we were asked about the best individual seasons in Ohio State history. And one that I didn't get to that I wanted to is Ryan Shazier's 2013 with 144 tackles, 23 and a half tackles for loss, 7 sacks, just 4 forced fumbles. He was awesome. And he was overshadowed by Manti Te'o, which still annoys me to this day. And I would spend my time online defending him, fighting for him, because not enough people were talking about him, but he was certainly incredible. And yeah, my fourth is James Laurinaitis, and the fifth for me would also be Andy Katzenmoyer. And not that there are other linebackers better than Andy Katzenmoyer, but there are certainly other presidents better than Theodore Roosevelt. So there's, I think if, you look at the actual Mount Rushmore, you're like, well, it's certainly not the 4 best presidents. It's 4 of the big ones. And then certainly, when it was being put together, Teddy Roosevelt was well known. But I think those 4 fit. It's hard to go against James Laurinaitis because he was 3-time All-American. He got all of the same awards that Andy Katzenmoyer did, and he did it very, very well. Now I'm going to throw up a graphic on the screen for the viewers.
Just for a second before you move on. Number 1, last week we went the same order 1 to 4 in quarterbacks. We just had the same top 5 linebackers, almost in order as well. This one surprises me as much as the quarterbacks, because there are maybe more than the quarterbacks, because there's so many here that I think we could ask 5 other Buckeye fans and have a couple of different names in here and be like, yeah, all right, that's cool. So that's pretty interesting. But I want to talk about James Laurinaitis for a second, just in terms of as a player, and maybe we'll talk about him as a coach a little later on and his legacy and everything else. But just in terms of as a player, I'm getting the feeling from you that you don't quite have him in that upper tier. And I feel the same way. It just never quite registered for me the way it did, I think, for most others, because I think when we look at all the accolades and everything he won, and as great as he was, I think that there's, put a couple other people in that era on the defense in the same role, and they're bringing home the same awards. And as much as I loved him, he never measured up to Hawk for me. Never.
No, and I would agree with that. I think maybe for me, maybe there's not as much action in the backfield for me with James Laurinaitis, because AJ Hawk had double-digit tackles for loss in a couple of seasons. James Laurinaitis had 8.5 as a sophomore, 8.5 as a junior, 7 as a senior. He found the ball. He had 5 interceptions as a sophomore, 2 the next year, 2 the next year. Sacks topped out at 5 as a junior. I think he had that huge Texas game as a sophomore, and he didn't ride that, but because he continued to play well. I mean, Ohio State was the number 1 team in 2006 for a very long time, played for a national title in 2007, and did what they could. They made a BCS bowl game with a true freshman quarterback in 2008. And I think another thing for me is when you look at James Laurinaitis, he'd always have more assists than solo tackles as well. And so I'm not trying to push back or anything like that, because he was still very productive over his time, but I don't have him up there with those other 3, because I think those guys they made bigger impacts in terms of in the backfield. And I think that's something that I also consider when I look at this kind of list. And Andy Katzenmoyer as a true freshman, like 12.5 sacks, like 24 tackles for loss as a true freshman, just basically point and shoot into the backfield. And maybe it's just different kind of defense, so you don't need your linebacker doing that. But yeah, I'm with you. Why do you have him kind of just a little bit distance from everybody else?
Honestly, I feel like it's just the feel. I can't really point to a reason. I think much of it is that I was so obsessed with AJ Hawk that when it could have been that, he came in and people I felt like were kind of anointing him maybe a little early, and I might have resented that a little bit. Like, here, look, we just replaced Hawk. Like, no, you didn't. It could have been some of that because I am a little bit like that at times. But it just never resonated in the same way for me, his play as Hawks did. And coming right after him, also probably, maybe if they were separated a little bit, I might feel different. I don't think so, but I might. But just that it was so back to back, one after the other. And I just always felt Hawk was just a different caliber of player.
Well, and so did the NFL. I mean, they were both very good in their respective franchises, but one was the number 5 pick, and the other was right at the top of the second round. Is there a portion of you that you saw Ohio State struggle defensively in 2006 and 2007 against Florida and LSU, and there's some is there a little bit of pushback because of the way those seasons ended for you at all?
It could play a role. Yeah. It might just have part of that, that overall feel that I have for it and the way that I came out. I'd imagine it probably does play a role. And that's true that AJ played on some amazing defenses and had a great supporting cast. James had a lot of guys too, but yeah, they dropped the ball a couple of times for sure.
Yeah, especially when in one they were a big favorite. So like the last show, the quarterback show, where I used math to tell everybody who the best quarterback was of all time at Ohio State, we know firmly, without question, it was JT Barrett. I've done the same thing with your, yes, there's some proprietary formulas, which I don't need to get too far into. Solo tackles, assists, tackles for loss, the yards that were lost, interceptions. I didn't use sacks because that's kind of sometimes a metric of how aggressive the defensive coordinator is. All Big Ten selections, all American selections. Chris Spielman, number 1. Tom Cousineau, number 2. Marcus Merrick, number 3. I think those might be the top 3 tacklers as well. The first guy that we watched that gets put on this list is AJ Hawk at 4. Steve Tovar is, I think, a 2-time All-American. He was in school around the same time that I was. And for me, number 58, Steve Tovar, big neck roll. He's another guy that does not get enough love.
Yeah, we don't hear much about Tovar at all. And I totally agree, though. I am surprised to see him at number 5 on the list here.
And I will say, and I told you this before the show, for some reason, Tommy Eichenberg didn't make it on this list. He should actually be number 20 between Ross Holman and Niall Diggs. Basically what I did is these are the top 20 tacklers in Ohio State history. And then I, went and found some other guys like Arvell Reese is not number 24. I just wanted to see where he was and give some perspective on him because he's going to be a topic of conversation, I'm sure, as well. But a pretty good look at some of those guys. Andy Katzenmoyer down there at 9, Randy Gradishar, everybody knows. Matt Wilhelm, another kind of overlooked All-American because that 2002 team had so many other guys that you're just completely focused on. But overall, a pretty darn good list of linebackers there. You see Lorenzo Styles at 16. Some of these guys, I wasn't familiar with Kelton Dantzler. He was an All-American, and you see some history here as well.
I've never heard of Kelton Dantzler. As we look at 1 to 12, any orders or any guys that finish in the top 12 that surprise you? I do think I'm surprised that Gradishar is at number 10. Again, a guy that I never saw play, but boy, everything you hear in the stats and everything he put up, the guy's an NFL Hall of Famer. I would have assumed he would be a little higher on the list, but cool to see Pepper there. Pepper, I didn't get to see him at Ohio State, but sure watched a lot of him with the New York Giants. And I remember the day I found out, wait a minute, that's a Buckeye? I had no idea, and I was all excited. And then I think he had a little stop at the Browns at one point too, which was cool. But yeah, Wilhelm, I'm with you. Underrated. He's so long. As a matter of fact, I just saw him in person for the first time. I could not believe how long this guy is. Just enormous. But yeah, awesome final year. I mean, he was just everywhere, making plays, and of course the national championship game. So that stands out to me in the top 12. And we go to the second side of this graphic here. I've never heard of Kelton Dantzler, Tony. Never even heard of him.
No, and I think the only reason I've heard of like Ed Thompson and other names is because I'm in the record books a lot looking at stuff. So that Kelton Danzler is the only name that I wasn't familiar with. But Raekwon McMillan, a 2-time second team All American. Joshua Perry had a bunch of tackles as a senior in 2014. Ross Homan was just solid. And like we were talking about before the show, Niall Diggs is a forgotten guy and he shouldn't be.
So we're a couple of big Niall Diggs fans, and that guy was an absolute animal. He was an animal. He was everywhere. He was a total dog, and played in an era that I don't know, man. A lot of dogs on those teams, and for some reason we just we never really get into him. I believe I talked about him with my brother not too long ago. How much we enjoyed watching Niall Diggs play, and had some time in the league as well. Really, really good player. But nice to see Eric Kumaro there. The Bose's uncle makes a top 15 on the list.
I think he was the number 12 overall draft pick his year, which would have been like 1987 or something like that as an outside linebacker.
Didn't work out,
but
did it?
No, not quite. So then we're talking all of these old school linebackers. I wanted to get into an old school linebacker lineup and go with, I wanted us to each pick a 3-4 of any Ohio State linebackers you want. You want 2 inside linebackers and then 2 intimidating outside linebackers that will rush the passer. And my 2 inside linebackers, I'll just let you know, I'm going with Ryan Shazier and AJ Hawk, and I'm not going to apologize for it. And then I've got on the outside, Niall Diggs. And then I'm going to throw Arvell Reese out there because he's big. He's what that pass rush linebacker position looks like. I did think about Alonzo Spellman, who is one of the most incredible athletes to ever come through Ohio State, legitimately played outside linebacker in the 3-4 for Ohio State. And then within like 8 years is playing defensive tackle for the Cowboys. That's how big that guy was. But I'm going Shazier and Hawk on the inside, Arvell Reese and Niall Diggs on the outside. And I feel just fine about that.
So I put this together thinking, all right, if I want to play in today's game and I can put my best 4 together to fit these spots, how am I going to go about that? And I went with Ryan Shazier standing next to Sonny Styles. And I have got, like, you can't run on these guys. You can't pass on these guys. You got the 2 surest tackles. You've got the size dynamic, the mix up between the 2 of them. And then rushing on the weak side in that 3-4, I've got Arvell Reese. I think that when we look at this cast of characters, he is the absolute best suited of any one of these guys to take on that role. On the other side, this is where I had some options here. And ultimately, I chose to go with Katzenmoyer. I think Katzenmoyer over there in that system could take on anybody, coming out to try and block him and make plays all over the place. And that 4 right there, I feel incredibly solid, could dominate college football.
I think, as a junior, if I recall correctly, they were listing Katzenmoyer at like 260 pounds, and it was too big at that point. But when we did an episode of Buckeye Weekly where we were picking guys from the Tressel era, from the Urban Meyer era, and the Cooper era to add to this team, and when it came to Katzenmoyer, I'm like, well, I don't know if I want him playing inside linebacker in today's game, but I'll put him on the outside. Right. I'll let him be the Arvell Reese in Matt Patricia's defense, that sort of thing. I got no problem with that. I'll let him set the edge and do what he does.
Absolutely.
And with your picks there, Sonny can also do the edge thing.
Yes.
Like, you can move guys in and out and around. So I like that.
So I'll tell you though, Tony, I'm sitting here thinking, like, am I being too recency biased? Like, I've got Arvell and Sonny in this list, but I honestly think that they're just the 2 best suited for today's game. And just luckily they came around at this time. And who knows, they probably don't play linebacker back in the day. And, maybe we would have seen other guys, fill that role if the game was different further back. But yeah, man, I don't think I'm being recency biased here. I think that they're really the best suited for those roles.
Yeah, I would agree because, just look at the NFL and their draft selections as well with those 2 guys. And they're both All-Americans. If you don't go with one of those guys, if you just completely ignore them, that's more bias to me than picking them, where you're like, well, I don't want to fall for the recency bias. It's like, well, Did you watch them? They're pretty good. They did some pretty good things. They'll probably help your defense if you go ahead and get them.
Speaking of that, then I haven't talked to you about this, but I was kind of going over my top 10, and as I'm going down the list, I'm going pretty far before I'm way well past 10 before I'm considering Arvell Reese, and this is a guy who just went so high in the draft and had a unbelievable plays at Ohio State at certain times, unbelievable skill set and tool set. But if we're just talking about, greatest linebackers in Ohio State history, I've got to see some more production. It's not there. Also, I don't think he was utilized a whole lot in the way you would have liked to have seen him be utilized his, one and done year. So he's not too high up on that list for me. And then Sonny, when we look at Sonny, who started 2 years, I think people, looking back might, even as recently as it was, might not remember that his junior year wasn't great. He got better every week, but the jump from junior year to senior year was exponential. Coming out of his junior year, if he'd entered the draft, we heard people talking about potential 5th round, great athlete, etc. What he put together his senior year cemented his legacy. When we look at so many of these other guys, they were dogs as juniors and seniors, and sure, he switched positions. We understand totally, but it is what it is. Nonetheless, I mean, he only had one great year.
Yeah, graduated early from high school and played safety for a year and then nickel, and then 2 years as a linebacker, one of those learning the position on the fly. And then you finally saw the finished product. And he'll say he's not a finished product, and I understand that, but as far as the college guy, that's pretty finished. And Arvell Reese, a season and a half, really, if you consider him being the 3rd linebacker in 2024. But even the second half of this last season, like, where was the production? And is that his fault? Is that Matt Patricia asking him not to do certain things, or only asking him to do some things? So I don't think I would have him in my top 10 either. Like, I can't have him again over Matt Wilhelm or maybe even Niall Diggs. Like, there's a bunch of guys who were productive for multiple seasons that I would have ahead of him. And if you're throwing him in there, it's not because of production, it's because of other reasons. And I guess that's
and fine. They're fun reasons. He's fun to watch. And I will say, like, as much as I like my paisan Matt Patricia, I will forever resent him for the underutilization of Arvell Reese, because football is fun. And I wanted to see that guy have more fun out there. I'll also say that it is fun for us as Buckeye fans to look back and have these very clear-cut, similarly timed eras of coaches. When we can go back and look from the Cooper era, the Tressel era, to the Urban era, to the Day era, and they're all like, there's a good chunk of time there. There's full cycles that have come through, and tons of great players for everybody. So it's always fun to talk about the best from this era, and these types of conversations I enjoy.
So let's move to this era, the present day. And if you're watching on YouTube, please hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the Buckeye Insiders channel if you've not yet done so.
I got a shirt, Tony.
Look at this. Yeah, I'm going to have to get some swag as well. Official. Click on Juck's shirt. See if that might just pause the video though. So just be careful with that. But as we're talking present day with Buckeye Insiders and also present day with the Ohio State linebackers, what's your concern level? Because you've said goodbye to Sonny Styles, you've said goodbye to Arvell Reese. You're saying hello to a new middle linebacker. Ohio State has had a first-team All-Big Ten linebacker each of the past 4 seasons. Can Payton Pierce continue that legacy? What kind of addition is Christian Allegro? The unproven nature of TJ Alford and Riley Pettijohn, and you can throw in Garrett Stover. There's a bunch of young talent, but the only proven player at this point in the Ohio State defense is Payton Pierce, and he's only proven as the 3rd linebacker. So what kind of concerns do you have this year?
So as far as Payton goes, it's like, my gosh, man, the way we heard and continue to hear James Laurinaitis talk about him, it just feels to me like with, an additional, now he's got that experience, another offseason. Payton knows not just his role, all the linebacker roles
Mm.
and what everybody else on the defense is supposed to be doing. He was into that, like, early on in his second year, he was already had the linebacker spots mastered and was going through that. And despite the physical limitations when compared to Sonny, when you know things that well, and we've heard Laurinaitis talk about this 100 times, when you don't have to think about it, when you see all your keys and you're just reacting, you're actually playing faster than a guy who's faster than you, who's not as smart as you up here. When we see that twinkle in Laurinaitis' eyes when he talks about Payton, I think it's about that. The toughness and that right there, because that's how James had to master the spot, and he was so good at it that he sees so much of that from himself in Payton. So that said, with his physical gifts, he's no slouch, obviously.
Yeah.
But he is a little limited, but I am really confident in him as a leader of the defense, the point guard, the Cody Simon. I think he's going to do really well in that spot. When we talk about Allegro, a guy who, shows a lot of stuff that's positive, but there is part of me that's like, man, he was kind of getting pushed out for two freshmen at Wisconsin. Luke Fickell knows linebackers very, very well. Coached them for a long time. That's his spot. And there is some of that concerns me, but then he comes over and now he's working with, to me, the best linebacker coach in the game, one of the two best in all of college football. And that should certainly increase what he's going to do. As far as physical gifts, he's big, he's long, he's fast. He's not the quickest, redirecting and things of that nature, not the twitchiest guy, but we've seen him plant tackles on their butts. He can rush. So I feel pretty good about that as a 1-2 combo. When we talk about the unproven guys, TJ seems to be really coming around. Really unfortunate that Riley missed. But when it comes to the two of them, I really like TJ. I've always liked TJ. I love what he brings. But to me, I think Riley has a chance to be special. And I think he's special up here too. And I think that if we're just talking about, productivity, I think that maybe that starts with a little more TJ. But maybe Riley just catches right up in the fall quickly and surpasses him.
I think the coaches are hoping that. And I remember asking, I think, Ryan Day about this in terms of not even Riley Pettijohn catching up with the defense, but them catching up with what Riley Pettijohn can do, because they only know so much and they didn't get to find out any more in the spring, which is unfortunate. So I'm like trying to figure out, and one of the questions I have here is, so who are the top three tacklers? I fully expect Payton Pierce to lead the team in tackles. Like he's a Texas tackling machine. You go look at his high school numbers, and I know high school whatever, but I'm always more encouraged by the linebackers that put up a ton of numbers in high school than the ones that they're ranked highly. But why did you only have 54 tackles? What's that about? And usually there's reasons for that, and it's not because of system or anything like that. But he's a machine. He's like Derrick Henry in terms of high school carries. That's Payton Pierce with tackles. And then I side with like Christian Allegro being the number 2 tackler, but I don't know that that's actually going to come to fruition, because who knows what they're going to be asking him to do. If they want him to be a little passive as an edge setter, that sort of thing, then, there probably won't be a ton of tackles there. I'm fascinated to see how they use Riley Pettijohn. If it's differently, I guess it has to be differently than TJ Alford as like a will linebacker at this point, but we don't know. And so I wouldn't be shocked if you've got 90 tackles for Payton Pierce and like 45 for 3 other guys.
Yeah, I think that you could be onto something. So what I had in the breakdown was, looking at last year, it was pretty defined as a 1-2-3 with Sonny, Arvell, Payton, and there was a pretty decent split. I had it written down, and somehow I've lost it in my stack of papers here. But when we look at this year, if you went Payton Pierce, leading tackler, by a good margin, then Allegro, then maybe dropped down quite a bit and had Riley and TJ in a similar range. That to me seems like probably pretty likely, because I do think, you know, you, as good as I think Riley's going to be, I think you really want to play TJ. You want to get that guy involved for sure. And he can do it. And also just one dude of the week, one of the 3 dudes of the week. So he's clearly putting in the work and making them happy. That's, that's the big honor this time of year, is giving him the dude of the week. And his neck is looks like Sonny now. It's gone this direction, both ways. So he's looking huge. He's looking massive, and he's becoming a favorite. I just don't think he's as skilled as Riley. And I just in the way they're going to use those guys, I've never known. Now, I've heard a lot of talk about TJ as to where they're going to use him. I don't even know where he fits best yet. I don't think we've seen him enough. We saw him a little bit playing on the edge, I think, last year, and I thought he looked pretty doggone good playing down there at the edge. And he's a little small for that, but it's just it's so unknown with those two. And you look back in that transfer portal, if they didn't bring in Allegro, like what we'd be looking at right now would be such a total mystery that it would kind of be terrifying, really.
But we'd have a bigger question, but there'd be fewer questions, where you know who the 3 are. But I would say, let's not forget about Garrett Stover, who was the number 2 middle linebacker in the spring. Now, is he the number 2 middle linebacker if Riley Pettijohn is back? And I don't even know if Riley Pettijohn's a middle linebacker at this point. And we saw TJ Alford playing the Will. We saw him playing the Sam on the edge, like Arvell Reese at times last year. So that's also one of the confusing parts about spring, is you get to see all these different guys in different spots. Payton Pierce, I don't think ever moved from where he was, and there's a reason for that, because that's his, he is that guy. He is that middle linebacker. He's the green dot. No need to move him around. But other than that, when you're talking about over the past, 4 seasons, there's always been 5 seasons or so. There's always been, this is the 3rd linebacker. For 2 years, it was Cody Simon. Then it was Arvell Reese. Last year, it was Payton Pierce. I have no idea. I could not tell you whether that's going to be TJ Alford or Riley Pettijohn. I assume it's going to be one of those two, but I don't know that. I have a complete coin flip in my mind as to who it will be. And I don't like dismissing TJ Alford because Riley Pettijohn's the higher ranked guy. And I don't like dismissing Riley Pettijohn because he missed spring. So I'm just going to pass it on to you.
It's true. And when we talk, Garrett Stover is part of the conversation. I was surprised that Garrett Stover was running number 2 behind Payton
Pierce.
And it was not so much. He has pedigree. He was a top 100 guy coming in. It's not like he was some bum coming in. He's got pedigree, one of the faster guys on the team. We heard that from everybody last year. And he even made the board. I think he was, the miles per hour board. He was up there like number 3 or something on the entire team, which is pretty incredible. But Tom took a picture last year, Tony, and I can't get it out of my head. It's Garrett Stover standing next to Arvell Reese and thinking that those 2 guys play the same position is like, dude, that guy can't be on the field. Are you kidding me? It was incredible. The difference in size, I wish I had the picture. It was just like, no way. No flipping way. And that scares me. And then I look at Sincere, and I watch this kid move around. We watched him in the spring game, and it's just like, wow, man. Sure, he's got a lot to learn, but my gosh, that talent is undeniable. And I wonder how long a guy like Stover can hold him off, because he's a force of nature and he's coming.
Well, and Eli Lee was the most impactful middle linebacker in that game.
Let's not forget Eli.
So I think we know there are questions. I think they're going to be okay, though, because there's a lot of answers. And there's veteran answers in terms of Allegro and Pierce, and there's athletic answers in terms of everybody else. So I think they'll find their way. And if they've only got 2 linebackers that are good enough to play, good news. You play a nickel defense. So I think you're going to be okay. And that 5-man front that he likes, that's usually got one linebacker and then one linebacker in back. So I think they're going to be okay there.
They have a lot of comfort in the coach. I think when I feel that certain kind of way about a coach, and I really think James Laurinaitis and Glenn Schumann are the two best linebacker coaches in the country. I just trust him. I just trust him that his unit is going to be really solid to really, really good.
I mean, when hasn't it been? And even as a GA, when it was his room and Jim Knowles was the defensive coordinator, but he was a GA, they were really good, and they continue to be really good. And there's no reason to expect with his teaching, his development, his recruiting, that suddenly you lose your 2 top 10 picks and now they go to hell. They're not going to go. They should be just fine. They might be a lot better than just fine. The fact that they went into the portal is interesting, but I think that's more a result of we need to continue to try to get older, or let's try to stay the same age, that sort of thing, rather than these guys can't play, because they want to play TJ Alford and Riley Pettijohn. They played him last year because they don't want to lose them.
Yeah.
So they're going to try to give them some snaps, and you're not bringing in somebody so that those two guys can sit. You're just trying to make sure you've got enough options. And then the job of Matt Patricia and James Laurinaitis is to make sure that those guys feel like they've got a spot, they've got a role, and that they can produce in that role, because 1, you're paying them to produce. 2, you don't want to lose them when you had plans for them, and then you've got to figure out, well, what are we going to do now? Because the one thing they don't want to lose is, you lose Christian Allegro after the season, and then you lose one of Riley Pettijohn or TJ Alford because they want to go play somewhere or get more money. And now you're in a position where, like, well, now we got to bring in somebody else. And then Sincere Johnson's like, well, what about me? And then it's just this perpetual thing. And I 100,000% believe they want to get their young guys on the field. And so if you do, then do it. And don't wait until, well, we just didn't have enough of a lead to get these guys out there as much as possible.
This has been, I think, the fan base in general, the sentiment, one of the biggest complaints throughout Ryan Day's tenure is not getting the young guys out early enough, and people want to see it. But now it's obviously, like you said, it's more important than ever. It's kind of like you got to do it. But then you look at the schedule this year, boy, not too many games look like you're going to have this layup lead. Like last year was such the perfect year for these young dudes to be playing a ton. And, it didn't happen as much. But when we look at guys like Allegro, if they enact the 5-for-5 thing, that that's a guy that could potentially stay. There's a couple of guys like that, and then they kind of throw off the math. And as we look at that, could be pretty advantageous for Ohio State in a lot of spots. It also makes coaches in some decisions, right? Like, what you got with this guy, right? He's solid to good. Now he's a year older. And sometimes that keeps you from taking that risk with the younger guy and letting him go out there and really get his feet wet, take his lumps, and then potentially emerge into a superstar who would be much better than this guy who's safe. So I don't really like the conundrum that puts you in. I think all in all, I originally thought that was going to be a net positive. And now I'm starting to think, this might balance out like anything else.
Yeah, the 5-for-5 is going to cause some issues, because if it creates a situation where you've got guys that are staying longer than anticipated, then you've got the young guys that you've recruited are like, so I'm going to be here an extra year before I really get to play. So it's the same thing we talked about on the last show, when if Julian Sand comes back, what is without winning a national championship, what is the decision-making process between Julian Sand and Tavian St. Clair, when how far you've made it with one guy and you don't know how far you could make it with the other, but you sure like to find out, as opposed to letting somebody else find out. And the 5-for-5 is going to create the same thing at positions that maybe aren't ready to leave for the NFL or a more developmental position. So I think that's going to be high drama, and the internet will not be happy about whatever happens. How could you let a 2-year starter leave? And then if you don't, then it's like, how could you let an unproven young linebacker leave, a former 5-star, and now he's going to go somewhere? And it's like, these are all great things for teams and players and coaches, but it just creates another issue that coaches have to deal with. And they've got, for all the money in the world that they make, they've got a lot of issues that they've got to deal with right now. And this is just going to be another one.
Yeah. And for as much as we, as fans of college football kind of lament a lot of the changes that have happened, it sure makes it so much more complex and interesting. And roster management is just, the possibilities are endless. What's the right strategy? I mean, it's all so much fun to discuss. I really love it. Yeah, definitely. That's going to be a wild one when they enact the 5-for-5. We're going to see, and not just at Ohio State, everywhere. So then the options open up to potentially bring in some guys you missed on the recruiting trail to backfill.
Speaking of the recruiting trail, so let's move to the future of the Ohio State linebacker situation, and having James Laurinaitis as that guy that is putting everything together, I think is as good as you could hope for. It's advantageous. It's he's got a good eye. He's got good teaching. He's got a good place to sell, and he's doing a very good job of that. I think fair to say yes or no, he is the best recruiter on the roster. I mean, Larry Johnson's doing a bang-up job right now in terms of interest and stuff, but is he the best recruiter on the staff right now, in your opinion?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. When we look at this era, it's so much more different and maybe not as consequential for guys to be great recruiters as position coaches. But you can really tell the ones that are really, they're working and doing a great job in having a great class because they decided that they were going to invest in this position, this particular cycle for whatever that is, or the ones who are just going to get it done regardless. And you can just see the difference. And James is always going to get it done regardless.
And it helps that Glenville is now back and has been back for a handful of years, because for a while things were quiet there. And now you're continuing to see like that. That's beneficial. Frankly, Pickerington as well. You can throw the fact that Pickerington has blown up. It has helped Ohio maintain some level of talent. So if I call him the new Brian Hartline in terms of the ace recruiter of the staff, I think that's, maybe something for people to think about. But I will tell you this, and I know how much you love all Big Ten teams and the people who make those teams and to come up with them. If I tell you that Brian Hartline, of the 24 players, the 24 receivers that he signed in his time at Ohio State, only 4 of them were first team all Big Ten. Does this sound like a successful recruiter to you?
No, that does not seem like a very high hit rate. If I told you, never mind, I'm not going to get into it. Everybody gets mad at me if I point out Cortez Hankton's resume.
And we will eventually talk about receivers, and we will be talking about that. But of those 4, that does not include Jackson Smith and Jigba or Emeka Ibuka, who are just fine.
Certainly those guys aren't all Big Ten caliber.
Right. But there's the ideal of what Brian Hartline was, and then there's the reality. And I think James Laurinaitis is somewhere in the middle of that, which is perfect, because it's hard to land 5-star after 5-star when you can only afford 1, and then you've got to get a 4, and then you get a 3. And that's kind of the way the receiver situation is at this point. If you get 2 5-stars, you may be getting a deal with someone, because there's only so much money to go around. So it's the importance of recruiting and the importance of having great recruiters. I think it's still, yes, you want them.
Oh, yeah.
But you can only do so much. So it's almost easier nowadays for, say, a guy like James Laurinaitis. You've got a lot of pressure, but your coaches, your head coach and your general manager know, like, I'm only giving you so much leash to go, and I'm only giving you such a big bag of McDonald's cash to go and get guys. So make sure you get 1, and then whatever else after that, this is where the scouting and all of that, the eye for the talent, comes into play. And that's not just the position coach. That's also the general manager. That's also the defensive coordinator who get put into that. But overall, with Laurinaitis, and we'll see how much longer he's at Ohio State, how do you feel about the future of the linebacker position?
Oh my gosh, I feel so unbelievable about it, especially with him And boy, you want to talk about scouting. You know, when we look early in a class at whatever list of, okay, here's the top 10 linebackers in the country. Those guys are so coveted. They cost so much money. They're so hard to get. They're so hard to land. And this dude landed a top 10 linebacker when it was all said and done, who was committed to Wake Forest and only had a Wake Forest offer. And James Laurinaitis got him at Ohio State. And that to me is one of the all-time, like, wow. He just got this basically like free top 10 linebacker who's 6'5", 210 pounds. I'm talking about Braxton Rembert, of course. And then followed that up with Prince Goldsby, another top 10 linebacker with the same build. And it's very clear what he's after here with these type of guys. He's saying, okay, well, we had Arvell here in this nice, tidy package for me to move and bring him up and do this with him. Let's get them when they're pups and grow them into that. And these guys both are just crazy fast, crazy long, a couple of those body types. And then you find the guys just, hanging out at Glenville, Kalen Bailey, 3-star, number 750 in the country. And I think that recruitment is one that the Buckeyes will win. This kid is absolutely a blue chipper. Forget that ranking. So explosive, so twitched up. I think he'll definitely be a factor in this defense moving forward. So really love this class. Obviously, Quentin Cypher was one of his number one picks. And if you're one of James Laurinaitis' number one picks, I know you're going to be a star. It's just like I have so much confidence in everything this guy does. When we talk about Buckeyes who've gone into coaching, there's a lot of them, Eddie George, we could add him to the list. I mean, there's a lot of them. There's none that I would rather lead the program as the head coach in a totally different discussion than James Laurinaitis. Being in a room when James Laurinaitis walks in, it's that old quote. My dad used to say it, guys want to be him and girls want him or something like that. Like he's just got this presence about him that is so different than anybody I've ever been around. I mean, it's just like this dude is that dude. And gosh, if he was leading Ohio State, I would feel so comfortable with it. But of course, he's going to have to, things will happen before that ever happens. He'll move around and go somewhere else, I'm imagining.
Well, then,
I don't know. Maybe
I see. I think he will eventually be Ohio State's head coach. I don't know that he needs to go somewhere to do that. I think, because we saw Ryan Day, his first head coaching job was Ohio State, and he was the Ohio State assistant. So they've shown that that's not necessarily the case. However, it's going to be almost impossible to keep him while Ryan Day is still, happily employed at Ohio State. So yeah, will he go somewhere? Like, who knows how long Matt Patricia will be around. Matt Patricia is grooming him to be a defensive coordinator. And then, what's going to happen after that. But, will that defensive coordinatorship be somewhere else? I feel like this is a guy that Ohio State will always have the opportunity to bring back home. Now, we can say the same thing about Marcus Freeman. I don't know if that's true.
I don't think that's true at all, Tony.
Okay, there you go. I don't see that happening with James Laurinaitis, but we shall see. The recruiting aspect of it and the size of the players reminded me of the fact that Asa Birch, one of the top 10 edge rushers in the nation 2028 and for more in Ohio, he was working with the linebackers this past week at camp. To give you an idea, he's big, 6'5", 220. The son of former Wolverine, Alfie Birch, which would be interesting to see if you can go ahead and bring in a Michigan legacy. If you want to prove your recruiting chops, that sort of thing. But do you think, let's talk about James Laurinaitis' future. I feel like can he and Matt Patricia coexist for more than a couple of years before somebody's going to throw a lot of cash at James Laurinaitis?
No way. Somebody's coming with that wad of cash, but I'll also say a couple of things. And number one, I don't feel like Patricia is a long-term Ohio State guy by any means. I don't think that, I think one more year out of him, I'll feel grateful. It was pretty clear that he was willing to leave and listening to offers in the offseason. and he didn't get the one that he wanted. These contracts mean absolutely nothing with these guys anymore. And if he gets that right offer, and that'll probably come if he does a really good job this year with a much less talented crew in the eyes of the NFL front offices, that Matt Patricia has totally resurrected his career. Time to give him a new opportunity. And I could absolutely see him leaving at the end of this year. Like, no doubt about it. Maybe one more year. I just don't think he's long for Ohio State. But I'll also say this. I feel like offensive and defensive coordinator are such highly specific, specialized positions this day and age in college football. And I don't think the skill set that it takes to be an excellent head coach, which James Laurinaitis has, that skill set, that is his skill set. That is Brian Hartline's skill set. I think it's a totally different skill set from being a coordinator and calling plays. And I just don't, and I think people are in head offices are recognizing this now. I don't need this guy to be the guy that does that or even have experience with that. I need him to be able to hire the guys that do that and delegate and be the CEO of the program. That is the Hartline skill set. That's the Laurinaitis skill set. That's the Ryan Day skill set. He just also happens to be a great offensive mind as well. And that's how he came up through it. But I just don't ever see the need anymore moving forward to say, we got to cram this guy into this hole that he doesn't fit in like Hartline before he can be that head coach. We're going to go make him have this crappy year calling plays. And it's just not what he does. It's just a special set.
No, I like that. That's, what John Harbaugh was a special teams coordinator before he went and became a head coach. You're looking for the idea that you have to climb each of these specific rungs of this ladder, and you've got to spend time at this coordinator rung I think it is becoming antiquated with the way that analytics is taken over and all of these other things. Just the way that you look at things is different in terms of GMs and owners and putting stuff together, team presidents, that the idea of so what if you've never called plays? Can you run this program? Can you keep it organized? Can you get the most out of players? Will they follow you? And if all of those answers are yes, but you've never called a game before, are you going to be calling the game when you're the head coach? No. So what does it matter?
I don't care.
So I don't think it's now, if you can do all of that, that's fine. And I wouldn't mind seeing what he can do as a defensive coordinator. When we say coordinator, that's just another way of saying guy calling the plays. And, I wouldn't mind seeing him do that. I have no idea what it would be. I think it depends on, a lot of this is philosophy. What does the head coach want? But also, I don't know that it's necessary. And that's why, I know there are coaches on Ohio State that don't necessarily want to be a coordinator, but they do want to be a head coach. And those opportunities will become available to them. And for Laurinaitis, I don't know that, I'm sure he would like to be a coordinator. I would agree with you. I don't know that it's necessary, but it feels like, well, that's just the next job you have to get to be a head coach. Unless you want to take a lower job like Urban Meyer going from receivers coach to head coach at Bowling Green. Does James Laurinaitis want to do that? I don't know. I think you get, once you have a taste of big time college football, and James Laurinaitis has had that at both Notre Dame and Ohio State, it's a lot to ask to take a step down to go be a head coach rather than, I guess I'll just go be a defensive coordinator somewhere just as big.
I was talking to an Ohio State staffer on Tuesday and going through his past resume and all his different jobs. And he was like, and then I was at Akron. He was at University of Akron, and his next stepping stone was a step backwards to 1AA. And he was just so offended by it. And I'm thinking, to anybody else on the outside looking in, going from Akron to Youngstown State, that's an even Steven. But yeah, man, you're dropping back. There's something to it. They don't want to do it. And I feel like Hartline did the offensive coordinator reluctantly. I think he wanted to learn. I don't think he ever felt like, this is what I want to do. I do feel like James is interested in getting into that. He does want to call a defense. Hartline, it just felt like this is just part of the stepping stone to be a head coach. But James, I do also think that he is interested in that as well, because he is kind of he just seems to me like that is more something that he is interested in. But
yeah, he doesn't have to be dragged
Right.
along into the defensive meetings and he is willingly putting his input in. And, sometimes it's, I want all three linebackers on the field, those sorts of things. Like
he's assertive.
he wants it. Yeah. And that's
Mhm.
great. And so, any other thoughts on Laurinaitis' future? Anything else before we get out of here? Because I do think overall, Ohio State's in a good spot now. Ohio State's in a good spot down the road. I do wonder how long he's going to be here, but I do think he will be back at some point down the road. And I don't think he has to leave to eventually be the head coach at Ohio State.
I would say, look, I know there's a lot of people, and I talked to a lot of Buckeye fans that are kind of under this impression that Ryan Day is going to be some 20-year head coach at Ohio State. And I don't think that I would be surprised if this doesn't go on for another 5 years with Ryan Day. And if that's the case, there is no other guy walking planet Earth that I would rather be the head coach at Ohio State than James Laurinaitis. And if that happens, man, I'll be the happiest little Jucky Buckeye ever.
It's funny because 30 odd years ago, I wanted Chris Spielman to be I want Chris Spielman will eventually be the head coach. My plan back then was, you get rid of Cooper, you let Fred Puggich have it for a couple of years while Chris Spielman is the defensive coordinator, learning the ropes. And then he will take them on for the next 30 years after he's done playing. And then you see Chris Spielman, his 1 year as the Columbus Destroyers head coach, go like 0-16. And you're like, well, maybe not. Maybe we'll just stick with coaches and that. And that's, and James Laurinaitis, he got into coaching for a reason, and he's done very, very well with it. It has suited him. I remember watching Brian Hartline talk at a coach's clinic saying, he had no intention of doing this, of being a coach, but then it became a calling. And everybody knows the story 11 years ago, 2016, helping the Ohio State Buckeyes prepare for the playoff game against Clemson, working on the scout team as a receiver, which was a thing that former Buckeyes would come and do. They'd come and practice, put the pads on. Urban Meyer invited him back for the next year, just hang around as an intern. It's like, nah, I don't want to do that, but eventually did. And essentially never left. And he, for the longest time, he's like, I'm happy just being a receivers coach. And I'm saying just being a receivers coach. He would never say just being a receivers coach. I am happy being a receivers coach, putting things together, giving these players tools, better lives, all of that's very, very rewarding. But then I guess at some point it's like, well, there's got to be more, because if you're only doing this, then you're not doing enough.
Right.
And ask Larry Johnson if he's doing enough. Ask there are some lifers as assistant coaches, and I know Larry Johnson wanted to be a head coach at one time, but you can do a hell of a lot of good as a position coach for as long as you want. Just ask Billy Davis.
Speaking of linebacker coaches.
Okay, so if you could have any two linebacker coaches, you're picking between two linebacker coaches to be the future head coach at Ohio State. I'll give you Billy Davis, or I'll give you James Laurinaitis. You get the last word.
We're going to go with 33. The future coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes says Tony Gerdeman, and boy, I hope he's right.
Yeah, I mean, he's my pick right now in terms of names out there, and Matt Patricia should be right behind him. But again, these are, who knows if they win it all this year, because Ryan Day wants a second national championship. That's something that he definitely wants.
Can I say, Tone, I like that he's been public about that. I like that he has said that. I think it's awesome to put your goals out there and not hide from them. We're just one day at a time crap. No, put it out there. Woody Hayes is the only other coach who's won multiple national championships at Ohio State, and I want to do that too. I like that.
You should want your head coach to be that confident, and it's not just confident. It's just, I'm telling you what I want. I'm telling, because they want to beat Michigan, they want to win the Big Ten, they want to win a national championship, and the fact that he has a personal goal that is also a team goal, I think that's healthy. I think that's good for everybody to see. Get behind it and root for it if you're a Buckeye fan. So that will do it for this episode of the Time and Change Will Surely Show. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. If you're listening go ahead and you can find it at youtube.com/@BuckeyeInsiders. If you're listening, 5-star rating and reviews, subscribe to the show, of course, as you know, and the BuckeyeInsiders.com website is still in construction. You go there right now, BuckeyeInsiders.com, sign up, put your email in there. We will give you an update as things get closer to launch. That will do it from here. Thank you all very much for tuning in, and we will talk to you all later.